AI Realized, the podcast about everything that is new, now, and next for enterprise executives deploying AI. Hosted by myself, Christina Elwood, and my collaborator, David Yakovovich.
Our guests will share what's driving AI adoption, use cases, and business models for the data and AI economy.
Why the future is bright.
Welcome to AI Realized, the podcast for enterprise executives leading AI deployments. From tackling security, data, and operational challenges to navigating organizational transformation, AI deployment offers a unique opportunity to redesign our organizations from the inside out. I'm Christina Elwood, your host for today's episode, and today we're talking with Claudionor Jr., and he has been leading AI in several companies, including CAIO of Zscaler, and he was a deep learning researcher at Google. He's one of the most influential voices in AI innovation and security. A Stanford-trained PhD, he's led pioneering work in deep learning, neurosymbolic AI, and secure multi-agent systems. He founded Brazil's first deep learning company, and he has advised global leaders through the World Economic Forum. In today's conversation, we'll explore the opportunities and risks shaping the next era of enterprise AI. Claudionor, welcome to AI Realized.
Hi, Christina. It's a pleasure to be here today.
You've been an early pioneer in AI for a long time. Maybe you'd give us a little short story about that and how it led to the first deep learning company in Brazil.
Oh, yes, sure. Actually, I did my PhD in Stanford in one of the techniques people use to build AI acceleration right now. And after we sold the company, I was living in Brazil. We sold the company to Cadence Design Systems, and I was assisting another colleague of mine with his company. And I told him, there's a new wave coming in, and this wave is deep learning. Let's build this company and focus on deep learning in this company. And actually, this company is called Kunumi, and it was acquired by Bradesco last year, which is the second largest bank in Brazil.
Congratulations. When did you realize that AI was really going to reshape enterprise strategy?
That's a very good question. So what happened is that even when I was at Jasper Design Automation, which got acquired by Cadence Design System, I was already using AI to fine-tuning algorithms. So there's a class of algorithms called NP-complete algorithms that are very hard to execute because they require exponential time to execute. And I was basically using AI back then to fine-tune those heuristics so that we could accelerate or speed up execution. And at that time, I saw that we could do a lot of AI. And then when I started reading more and more papers in deep learning, I said, okay, there's a new wave coming in, and I will basically jump into this new wave.
Gotcha. You did research during your PhD days, but you also did research at Google. How did your research work influence your industry approach?
Yes, at Google, actually, I was in the Pixel team, and we were building AI acceleration for video codecs, for video encryption and decryption, video compression. And actually, the stuff that I did, Google also was used by CERN in the research that they did with subatomic particles like boson of Higgs. We were even the cover page of Nature magazine. And ST Microelectronics also create a product out of it that encapsulate on it because we could quantize and reduce the model size at the same time to more than 100x in the size of the model and getting the same accuracy. So that people were very happy with that back in 2021 when we published the paper. It was the cover page of Nature Machine Intelligence.
Good for you. I'm a scientist by education myself, so I always enjoy following the trajectory of AI in both the enterprise and in science. It's my guilty pleasure. So you made what I thought was a really fun claim, which is that we're moving from bring your own data to bring your own agents. So for the executives listening, what does that shift really mean in practice? And how soon can we expect it to happen?
Yes, so bring your own data, or YOD, actually means that a lot of people, when cloud came, basically they said you bring your own data and then you're going to incorporate the data into our analysis mesh and figure out what the data is about. But in reality, what it means is that people had to understand the data internally in corporations. So with agentic flows being able to encapsulate the data layers, we're entering a phase in society where we can basically tell people, instead of give me your data, I can basically tell them your own agents, because agents, they add the data, but they add also an interpretation of the layer, which is like adds intelligence to the layer. And this brings another layer of a hyper-connected devices where instead of basically say, give me the raw data of what your machine is doing right now, I could just say something like this. Give me the point where you think there are anomaly detections on your data, and then I will basically interpret just those points from now on. Imagine this.
I think it's a very exciting innovation to be using agents in this way, but they have some challenges too, securing them, providing guardrails, and we've seen some really interesting cases lately with exfiltration. What are your thoughts about that?
I don't know if you read on the news, but last week someone basically posted that in DEF CON, last week or the week before, they were able to infiltrate Copilot from Microsoft by using prompt injection and bypass guardrails. And this is really a challenge because remember, we're talking about probabilistic interpretation, probabilistic analysis of text, and it's not enough in probabilistic. It's very easy to bypass those systems. No matter how much you try to secure, you need another logic layer on top of that in order to be able to secure those systems. And even you talk about MCP or HWA or even distributed agents, there's another problem that we see, that we're basically shipping our confidential data to those entities that are outside our security perimeter. And we are authorizing them and trusting them with your most precious data. And that's really a problem because we don't know if that company on the other side has the same level of security that you have. And you're trusting them with that.
Do you have thoughts about how to address that shortfall?
So that's basically one of the open problems right now that we have with distributed multi-agent systems. Because what I've been telling companies is that if you have secure data, if it's not a toy application, don't send the data outside your security perimeter. Keep the data inside and keep the agents inside. I think that's the most advisable solution right now for multi-agent systems.
Yeah, I think that's the only solution right at the moment, but we do need some innovation in that area for sure. And many leaders are worried about getting business value from AI without creating new risks. If you were advising a board, what are the top 3 questions you would advise them to ask their teams right now?
So first question is if your data is sanitized or not. People don't understand that the data has, with the advance of cloud techniques, we started dropping or saving everything. So instead of being a data lake, we basically create a data dump. That we basically drop everything into the cloud because we say later on we are going to figure out if you ever need that data or not, or you're going to use. Guess what? Now with agents that scans your data, we are basically feeding agents with that data that we said it was temporary. And we could have data that is basically conflicting data and even data that has become obsolete because data is temporal. The second question I would ask the board is, what risks are you willing to take? Okay, because remember, it's not that I'm saying that don't use multi-agent systems, don't say that data out, but you have to understand everything has a risk, a return, and maybe if you're just doing something that it's a toy example, it's basically talk to your data internally and the data is not confidential, it's okay to assume the risk. Okay.
So the board should be asking the executive team how they are. How would they ask that question? How are you protecting us from
Question is
risk? Or
you need to do, instead of basically saying just this is like the AI strategy for the company, this is the AI strategy together with the security strategy. Because with the security comes risks. Okay. And for each application you want to do, I'll give an example. Suppose, remember public companies, when they have like financial auditing, they usually have those closed rooms that people can sometimes cannot even bring cell phones inside. And now I've heard of people doing, oh, we have a multi-agent system that does the financial auditing for you. So When you had that in person, you basically did not even allow people to bring cell phone to that room where they're doing financial auditing. And now people are saying it's okay to send the financial auditing outside your security perimeter because they are safe. I think there's a discrepancy on that, and people need to analyze. And the third question that I would ask is, what are the unknown applications that could generate the greatest profit for us using AI? You have to understand that most of the workflows in corporations, they have never been documented. Imagine this, you have this email you send person A to person B, and this carries an importance because it's role playing, but it's people basically carry over with sending to person A from person B. But right now, if that email is not answered timely, that may result in loss of revenue or cost revenue or loss of opportunity for the company. So those types of interactions, they could be easily processed and automated using AI workflows, and even have AI workflows working towards our favor. So people need to understand what are the new opportunities people are willing to take.
That's a great question, isn't it? Because that starts the right discussion. I also often hear from people advising boards and then the leadership teams of those same boards that there is a hesitance on the part of the leaders to raise their hand to make a recommendation about how to use it, either because they are unclear what that will do to the way they're perceived, or because they aren't sure what impact that would have on the business and the business strategy, and they don't know that they're prepared to be the person in that hot seat, if you will. And so they're not raising their hand, but behind closed doors with just their peers, they're willing to talk about that and very openly talk about it. Now, I don't really think that's a trust issue between the leadership and the board. I think it's a lack of transparency about the appetite that the board has for there being new suggestions for strategies for the company going forward with this technology. So they're really doing it all with efficiency related things with everybody can agree that saving money is a good thing.
Yeah, you have to understand, everything is based on a piece of technology that is called LLMs. But LLMs is not the end goal of everything. We live in a world with rules. And my wife has a Tesla with self-driving, and I turn on the self-driving all the time. But you have to understand that self-driving has risks, and even the Department of Transportation have not realized that once you turn on the self-driving, even though you may have your hands on the wheel, your attention span has dropped to 10 to 20%. That's a reality, okay? And now if you transpose that to LLMs and to agents making decisions in corporations, the same thing happens. Once you have an AI taking over that role, you have to understand that attention span of people will drop. Afraid to put systems that rely on probabilistic reasoning, for lack of a better word, but they make those systems making decisions. Those decisions are prone to errors. So I just joked today to someone on LinkedIn saying most of the problems with agents is not developing the agents or the infrastructure. It's explaining to upper management why hallucinations happen all the time and trying to reduce hallucinations in those systems. And I think this is the real issue that we have.
Of the three questions that you recommend the board ask of the leadership team, which one of those do you think will reveal the biggest blind spot?
I think the data. I always say it's very funny because when I was the chief AI officer at Advantest, I pushed like a LinkedIn article saying my next job is going to fix the data problem in corporations because people don't understand that with bad data. This was like in 2022. It was even before or early 2023. So this is even before or at the time ChatGPT was out. So people don't realize that if the data is bad, anything that you feed to the pipeline later on will come with bad response. LLMs and agents cannot fix bad data. They rely on the data to be correct.
You mentioned the problem of this pooling of all this data that we really didn't do anything to prepare. We just shoved it in the data lake or whatever for later Gator. One of the things that Steve Jones over at Capgemini has made a point of is that the reason the analogy that data is like oil is that, like oil, data needs to be refined and processed. And he likes to say that with AI, we are moving the consumption of the data to the wellhead. completely unprocessed in any way, shape, or form. And of course, we didn't build the applications to generate the data we need for the AI. It's exhaust from the use of the application. The application wasn't designed to generate the data that we need. So we have to rethink how we build applications, and perhaps agents will solve that because we'll replace a lot of them with agents. But the issue of having data that comes out of whatever system generates it in good form, in normalized form, et cetera, so that it can be used by the systems is a whole nother way of thinking about data.
And we're going to multimodal now. The example that I like to mention is this. Suppose that you put all information about F-16 airplanes into a multi-agent system that can talk about how to learn how to fly an F-16, and you say, show me the cockpit and where the instruments are located. So F-16A, which was basically released in, I think, end of the 70s, all the instruments were analog. The latest version of F-16, all the instruments are digital. And if you say, I need to learn how to fly F-16, you don't know which picture you're going to get, whether it's the picture of the F-16A or whether it's the picture of the latest F-16. And shows you how data can be conflicting. And depending on how you fine tune the question that you want to ask, that may give a different answer each time.
Yeah, so true. And if you take and you couple it with multi-agent, now you have many more degrees of variability, don't you? It's at least to the power of n, if not greater than to the power of n. So you've worked on advanced multi-agent systems, and they were able to achieve results a single model agent couldn't achieve. What are some concrete examples of those systems and why the architecture that you came up with mattered?
So the first thing that I always did is basically to create an infrastructure that is going to clean up and analyze the data that are going to feed to those multi-agent systems. Okay. If you don't have a system that monitors, protects the data, I basically say you need like an annotation at the meta level layer of every single piece of data that you're going to ingest into a multi-agent system. The second thing that you have to understand, I put a logic layer on top of that. As I mentioned to you, if you're driving like a Tesla car and there's a wall and the full self-driving is turned on, you don't want the full self-driving to not hit the wall with 99.9%. You want it to not hit the wall 100% of the time. It means that's you need the rule layer that basically goes above what the machine learning or AI is doing to make sure that for the business operation, we know certain laws must be observed.
Are there frameworks for that rules layer that you favor?
There are starting to appear, but most of the time you need to create those by hand. And that goes beyond just guardrails because interacting with the business layer of the company that using that.
I see. So it's like a rules-based infrastructure layer for feeding the data to the agents.
And knowledge graphs. So it's rules and knowledge graphs on top of what we have as agent or LLMs. And people are starting to understand that we need something beyond just agent that is an LLM pushing code and executing code because they're going to hallucinate a lot. There are several cases. One of the cases I've seen recently is someone was using like one of the coding agents, like vibe coding, and they basically decided to delete the database of users, and then they create a fake database when the person said, did you delete? So the vibe coding created like a fake data saying, okay, I didn't delete anything, but it was fake data because the database had been deleted.
Wow. Okay. So what are the use cases that let me put it a different way. One way to go about building an agent solution is to have lots of very small single purpose agents that you put together into an orchestrated system. Another way is to build an agent that's got complex steps that it can perform. And there are also cases where you build something in between, where the agents have medium level of complexity, but together they can do many things differently. So you can architect them to operate in different types of swarm configurations. How do you make the decision about which of those approaches is best suited to a particular use case?
That's a very good question. So usually the first question that I ask is this: what will happen if I give it the wrong question?
Okay.
What People call the swarm that basically asks the internet, generate code, uses the code, stuff like that. They call this like a deep research. Some people call deep research because they search the web, they write code to do certain things, and they execute the code. And as long as you don't care too much if the result is wrong, because you're going to have some other systems to check the results, or maybe it will not influence, but they will just generate support information, it's okay. There's another class of applications that I call AI workflows that you need a little bit more structure. And in that structure, there may be algorithms that may solve the problem better than LLMs. I usually basically say, finding bugs in a code. There's an article in VentureBeat that said the same thing recently, but kept saying that. I did my PhD in two of the companies that I participated that were sold before. They were on formal verification. Finding a bug in a hardware description or software description in general is an NP complete problem. So it requires exponential space or exponential time to solve. There's no way with the current architecture of LLMs that you can possibly believe that they can solve an NP complete problem. Okay, in general. And that's one of the examples that there are formal proof solutions. And in my GitHub, I basically have one example that we did when we had formal proof together with LLM cooperating together. It generated good results. And sometimes there are algorithms that are already good to execute some problems. So the idea in those cases is basically we have a set of tools, and those tools may involve algorithms that have been created in the past and that are very efficient, much more efficient than LLMs to do the job. And sometimes those workflows, they need to be integrated. And there's a space for that too, especially if you cannot afford to have hallucination in the system.
So the more the correct answer is required, the more you go to the algorithm end of things with machine learning or predictive analytics or other types of algorithm based. And the more you are tolerant of variability, the more you can lean on a heavier generative AI type of approach.
Both are generative AI. I participated in an event with VCs in the Bay Area a few months ago, and people are saying, in user interface, as we know, in the next few years, they're going to change a lot. So remember, it took me like 20 years to fully understand how to use Excel spreadsheets and how to fully use the full power. And I still don't consider myself to be an advanced user. But right now, that means the 20 years, it basically means repeating and interacting, pointing, clicking different places of the user interface. Right now with LLMs, it's much easier if I can just ask the LLM what I want to do, and it detects the intent for me, and then it may switch to an algorithm that it's going to execute. This gives an example that LLMs are changing the way we interact with the systems, first in typing, then later on with audio in, audio out. But they provide a very good, even in AI workflows, they provide a very good interface to the users. Okay. But they still need a little bit, if you care about the result and if there are financial loss, then you still need to have a more organized flow in the agents to be able to execute, which people call AI workflows.
Okay. That seems to make sense that that's a core value for an enterprise to be able to have AI workflows. So we have LLMs perhaps for your language intensive work and then AI workflows for your process areas of work. Any other areas that you think there are natural fits between traditional AI and generative AI?
You have to understand that large language models are very good to summarize and analyze text, less to do numbers. Okay. For example, someone posted recently that although right now LLMs could, the GPT-5 could count, I didn't test that, but it was on LinkedIn last week, that although it could count correctly the number of R's in strawberry, it could not determine the number of B's in Burberry. Okay. And that basically shows that there are limitations on the technology that people need to be aware, especially when they're going to start outsourcing a lot of those tasks to LLM or agents alone. And I think in the world that we are going to see later on is that we're going to have both worlds are going to be living together, like algorithms on the one side and then LLMs on the other side. Maybe the LLMs doing the interaction with the user for you.
Do you feel that enterprises are overestimating their security readiness for using AI in so many different use cases in the business?
What I usually see is that people tend to not mention it's taboo to basically talk about the security of agents and also things like vibe coding. There is a benefit if you consider vibe coding, for example, as a live manual on how to interact with software. But more than that, they can start writing quickly, very rapidly. That's my experience. And usually, even when I use vibe coding, just one example, the first thing that I do, I save my directory, do the vibe coding, and then I do a diff on everything that it generated, and I start editing, eliminating those. Because later on, after 3, 4 interactions, 30%, 40% what they generated basically garbage. People will not agree with that, but the reality of the game is because they cannot solve and complete problems like how to hit a line of code for complex code.
So you don't trust any of the code that is generated and basically don't use it for vibe coding.
I do generate the code, but I always in between interactions I save the in section. I say that and I'm going to write like a blog on this, like on LinkedIn in the next few days. I said the most useful tool for me is TKDs, which basically shows the previous version, the current version that vibe coding generated, and then you could see what it generated, and then you can undo some of the stuff.
Yeah, I see. So you do an iterative review.
And one of the problems with vibe coding is that before the user used to have full control, so he would have full knowledge of the thing. And we're basically outsourcing the knowledge and understanding of the code to an LLM. And remember, LLMs are good for text summarization. They're not good for logic analysis.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk a bit about LLMs. We're starting to hit some upper limits on LLMs. And you've done some work in neurosymbolic AI. Tell me a bit about where you think neurosymbolic AI will fit into the picture as we hit those upper limits on LLMs.
Okay, so of course, one of the problems that I can mention to you that I solved recently, no, it's one of the solutions available. Suppose that you want to test your legacy software. I can send you the GitHub link to the package that I created. So if you want to generate tests for a legacy software code base, basically figuring out how to hit certain lines of code, this is an NP complete problem. So we need to outsource that to a formal proof engine that can hit that line. I did some experiments with GPT, Anthropic, all the public and private models. Usually, as the code complexity increases in one function, they end up not being able to solve that problem for more complex functions. They usually can solve for very shallow functions, which basically means that it fits in the token space. But that's one of the examples where we have formal proof engines together with LLMs, each one doing what it knows best. So once the formal engine knows how to sensitize the code, how to hit a line of the code, it passes that information to LLM, and the LLM can. This shows you how we have to interact both models, like formal proof models, or even some people argue that neurosymbolic is actually a knowledge graph layer on top of, and that provides information to.
So that's the combination that you would use for doing that legacy code review because the legacy code is so long and complex and it doesn't all fit in the memory. So you would put the whole thing in the neurosymbolic, find the right lines of code, extract that code, and give that to the LLM. Is that the process that you're describing?
That's exactly what I have, and I'll send you the link later on. But it finds how to sensitize the code. One of the basic problems of generating tests, you want to have line coverage of your entire code base. And as we reach towards the end of a function, you're going to see that it's very rare that an LLM can generate a sensitization condition for complex functions. For easy functions, 3 lines, then it's very easy. But if you have a function with 400 lines and 500 lines, I would basically say they never get past the first few lines of the code. So that's why we need another model that basically does a formal proof. And this is one of the examples. I think Amazon recently posted a blog or a paper saying that they're using neurosymbolic also to validate the results whenever they have to generate code, because they can execute a formal proof And that formal proof can actually give insights if the code is correct or not, because only a formal proof engine can do that for you.
I think our listeners would be very interested in those links and being able to pursue this on their own. So if you could share those, we'll put those in the show notes. Talking a little bit about more where things are going. 3 years from now, what will separate enterprises that are leading in responsible AI adoption from those that are falling behind?
So there's no doubt that the world is going to multi-agent systems. And I myself have created several multi-agent systems in my past life. Actually, I joke saying my first multi-agent system was created in 2016 when I was working for Synopsys. To understand a very complex hardware system that we had, I had to understand users' questions and translate to scanning logs of several devices. I basically created a system to do that back then. This is like almost 10 years ago. But there's no doubt that corporations will have to go to multi-agent systems. They will have to start more and more to worry about security of those systems, because it's not only about LLM security. A joke saying LLM security is the easy problem of the whole AI arena right now. But the problem of multi-agent systems is that once you send your data out, you have to open the floodgates of hell to send your data there. So people will need more and more to worry about security. Okay. And of course, we're going to start seeing a lot of new opportunities that are going to be created with agents. Remember, LLMs are very good to correlate a large number of text entries. Okay. And that's one of the things they excel into. They hallucinate, and there are applications which is like where hallucination is good. I usually joke. I was talking to a CEO of a company earlier this year, and he told me what he could use and why hallucination was a bad thing. I said, not necessarily hallucination is a bad thing. I was basically telling him, suppose that you want to create a new product in two different areas, and you could basically tell an LLM, generate for me a new product name for those that involves those two areas in this scenario, and give me the reason why those products are good. The name is good. And that's one of the applications that you want to creativity in people.
Yes, I've heard that story too, that if you want more creativity, you want more hallucination. Well, so that's what's happening. That's what you're projecting is happening for companies that are adopting responsible AI. What about the companies that are falling behind? What do you project is going to be true for them 3 years from now?
It's going to be harder and harder to compete the market. So one of the reasons I've been talking to CEOs and board members, they invite me to talk to them, is because they need to understand how they have to structure the organization, how they have to structure the AI plan so that they can move to the next phase. One thing is to play with ChatGPT. The other thing is to build systems that are reliable, that you can control hallucination, and then you can extract results out of them.
Where do you see AI transforming the enterprise in the coming years? What's a fully AI operationalized business going to look like compared to where it is today? What does that transformation look like?
The way that I see it is that a lot of repetitive work can be outsourced to LLMs, especially if you start realizing that you need a way to ground the system, and by grounding, to verify if the LLM is hallucination or not. Some systems are easier to ground than other systems. If you want to analyze a very large number of text data points, then LLMs are going to transform the business. Imagine this case that you want to know where you're going to open a new store for your business. And by doing that, you want to check where the competition is opening stores. And you can see that because there are public records everywhere in cities and newspapers. And suppose that basically gives an idea in terms of competitive landscape where people are going. And by basically being able to search that, it can give you spots that you can open new store for your business. This is just a very simple example on how businesses can transform. And if you do not use AI, you're going to be in disadvantage.
Gotcha. Okay. So, for what kind of guidance do you have for executives who are early in their AI adoption journey?
They have to start looking into how they can use AI in their journey. They probably need to start looking at which business opportunities. If they are averse to risk, they should be looking at the business opportunities where they can have more control. Okay. And sometimes I usually tell companies, they start with just talking to your data. If you don't want to send your data outside, because remember, even an HR letter sent to ChatGPT for evaluation, they can be basically be, you may have problems with data privacy and stuff like that. So you have to understand the risks and how to do that. So the first level is just talking to the data and creating a few scenarios where you could talk to the data. Next scenarios is using some AI workflows or deep research, and then start going to multi-agent systems and integrating those multi-agent systems. I did a presentation recently at MIT where they're saying that we are starting to prepare the world for trillion agents running, not billion agents. We have billions of people, and for each, so if you're talking about trillion agents, we're going to see, yeah, we are saying that for each person, we are going to have 1,000 agents working for that person. One of them could be, for example, personal assistant for every person in the world. Imagine that next time we talk, my personal assistant talks to your personal assistant. It has access to my calendar. It has access to your assistant, has access to your calendar, and they start negotiating and doing role playing in that mode. This is where we are going.
Okay. And so, what resources do you recommend to listeners who want to learn more about you and about your work and about their moving forward on their AI journey?
I think there are several reports. I'll send you my LinkedIn connection there. And there are several reports from several people talking about the future. World Economic Forum, we have two reports that we released last year that I participate on them. One of them is on AI agents. The other one is AI and cybersecurity. And I think those are good start points. But you have to understand that even for me, the technology is advancing very rapidly. And they usually say, if someone tells you that he or she knows everything about AI right now, I don't know. So I know that I don't know. And I have to constantly read a lot to be able to barely being able to keep at the pace that things are happening right now.
Yeah. I think once people get moving on their journey, they certainly do not lack for things to add to their knowledge. But getting started seems to be one of the more challenging phases of the technology journey that they're on. So I find that the Section AI training is a good place to turn to for people to get started. You can take 3 free classes a month. It's not expensive to buy, and it's a great program to bring inside your enterprise if you're looking to train your employees. So it also gives you a chance to use whatever it is that you might be using for your employees. So I think that can be a good tool for folks. Do you have anything else like that for early on in people's journey?
I think one of the things that I always like to recommend to people, there's like this resource, deeplearning.ai from Andrew Nig. It's a very good resource, and it has, I think it has one of the courses, AI for executives, something like that there. And several universities, they're having those programs right now. And the one thing that you have to understand, I gave a presentation recently to a research department of a big company, and I basically told them, building those systems, it's not an LLM job. It's a software engineering job. So do not disregard that you need several key aspects that are algorithm based in order to put those systems. For example, I saw a demo recently on a RAG based system. RAG is basically when you connect the LLM to the data and trying to index the data. And they said, look, someone told me, we want to put this in production. And the first question that I asked the system is this: tell me why I should buy the competition and not you. And the LLM basically gave me the answer. That shows you a very good, you have to be careful and you have to build systems. And it's not just LLM connecting to your data. You need guardrails, you need a lot more to make those systems work.
You have been doing this work for a long time. And you have worked with many executives in different capacities. You've worked with boards, you've worked with peers, you've worked with clients, you've worked with students. You've had many different types of executives and leaders that you've worked with who have different levels of knowledge and understanding. In this whole evolution of AI, what's your defining leadership edge in guiding other AI leaders?
First of all, to be humble that the things are moving at a much faster rate than we can possibly imagine. So each small group, they probably have leadership and dominance in a certain area, but it's very rare to have the same organization to have leadership. Even if you talk about OpenAI, Google, and maybe Google has, because Google can afford having like a very large team in Microsoft, but most of the organizations cannot afford that. And another thing is that don't be afraid of the technology. You have to do it consciously, but without being afraid, because it's not that we're discussing if the technology is going to be adopted. We're discussing when it's becoming widespread use. And it's basically becoming widespread use right now. And you have to understand, as I mentioned to you, there are two taboos that you have to be aware of. People are not talking too much about the risks. They try to put under the carpet the risks, and especially in multi-agent systems, people tend to claim that LLMs and agents can do stuff when in fact you need some other tools like formal proofs or neurosymbolic tools to be able to solve the problem. So I think people are starting to realize that the neurosymbolic, I've seen several reports, people saying that we need a logic layer on top of the agents to be able to secure the interaction. And this is starting to happen more and more right now.
Great. Thank you so much. And Claudionor, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. I look forward to sharing the links that you are providing for us with the show notes so people listening can follow up on the conversation. So thank you very much for joining me today on AI Realized.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.